here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. Former Taiwan leader Lee Teng-hui died of illness on Thursday. A Chinese mainland spokesperson stressed that Taiwan independence is a dead-end road. Zhu Fenglian, spokesperson for the Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council, added that the historical trend of national reunification and rejuvenation cannot be stopped by anyone or any force. What about one country, two systems in Taiwan? What is the impact of China-U.S. conflict in Taiwan? Our panelists give us answers. For the Taiwan issue in Taipei, Chen Youping, professor from the Department of Public Administration and Policy from Taipei University, and in Beijing, Yang Xiyu, senior research fellow from the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Mr. Chen, of course, there are a lot of things going on. The geopolitics between China and the United States is making the Taiwan issue ever more complicated with, of course, a lot of complications also on the island, Professor.
Yes, it is indeed. Recently, we've seen that the United States is taking on a harder line toward mainland China, and we are also looking at the Trump administration taking a very unfriendly approach toward mainland China. In that process, we also noticed that they are playing the Taiwan card even more strongly. So Tsai Ing-wen, the DPP chairman and also the current leader in Taiwan, is very much willing to help out with the Americans' approach toward mainland China. And that kind of situation worries a lot of people in Taiwan because people think when the two elements are fighting each other, you better stay aside. You better keep quiet. Otherwise, once you're involved, Taiwan is the one to suffer.
When they say two elephants fight, it is the grass on the ground that's likely to suffer. And those who are trying to take advantage of the situation usually do not know what kinds of future they are heading for. Professor Yang, though, from your perspective, how do you see the latest?
Well, I think the administration in Taiwan is playing a role as a trigger on the U.S.-China relation, which has been in worse and worse shape. And such a play by Taiwan administration is really dangerous, both for the U.S.-China relation and especially for Taiwan itself. Simply saying, if Beijing regards Taiwan inclining to the U.S. more and more closely, that will mean the risk of separation is increasing. That will push Beijing to go determination for all means for the unification.
If we talk about China-U.S. regarding the issue of Taiwan, there's a very clear line over there. Some suggest that in 1979, for example, the joint communique on the establishment of diplomatic relations issued by the government of the United States of America and the People's Republic of China, which is China's mainland, asserts that the United States of America recognized the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China. Within that context, the two sides agreed that the people of the United States would continue to maintain cultural, commercial, and other unofficial relations with the people of Taiwan. Now, I don't want to go into the old documents, but sometimes the history is really the thing we have to look into before we reach any conclusion about the reality. You know, looking at the history, how do you see the current stage? Is it a storm in a teacup, or this is very much worrisome?
Well, the situation now is getting more and more serious because it's not as if Taiwan is simply a pawn in the game. It is likely, if we look back in history, Taiwan will be sold out by the Americans again. In the 70s and 80s and the 90s, we've all seen examples of American government selling out Taiwan, ignoring Taiwan's interests, only to protect American national interest. So people here today are arguing that whether we should take sides, because it's obvious that Donald Trump is pushing for a trend that is exactly the opposite of what everybody else wants. Now, he's getting more radical because of his likely electoral defeat. So he's worried, and he's getting more and more progressive and radical in terms of his political manipulation. But Taiwanese today, maybe Tsai Ing-wen is an exception, feel that this is not the time to sit with the American government and try to fight against mainland China. It is not wise. Not to mention that we look at the statistics today. This year, we have about 46% reliance in terms of our export business as a percentage of our GDP on mainland China. Now, how can you fight against somebody, your neighbor and your relative, when you are relying on them in terms of the trade and other commercial activities? And at the same time, Taiwan is very worried whether we have enough capacity to fight along with the Americans. Many people, especially the younger generation in Taiwan, are not willing to take part in any potential U.S.-China military conflict, because for them, this is a fight, this is a war that they are not willing to get into.
Professor Yang Shiyu here in Beijing. Since Professor Zheng talked about history, let's still look at some part of the history, some of the latest stance given by Washington regarding Taiwan has been handed down from the George W. Bush administration. Many of us remember very clearly in the year 2003 regarding the Taiwan issue. Former U.S. President George W. Bush, at the time sitting in the White House, has bluntly served the notice that he opposes plan for a referendum in Taiwan, which his administration views as a means of stoking pro-independence sentiment. Now, he is an American Republican administration. Whether it's Republican or Democrats later in the Obama administration, policies regarding Taiwan has not been changed much. So, Professor Yang, now this is a unique precedent that we are seeing in the United States. Many of my American friends told me so. So, do you think this president would go to an extreme that to destroy this very delicate balance between the mainland and Taiwan?
Well, you mentioned a very critical and important historical fact. You're right. George W. Bush was really unique, who was the first one talking about oppose. But the other fact is, from Nixon to at least the early time of President Trump, all American presidents from both parties go along with one China policy. All the administrations since 1972, the Shanghai Communique, recognize both sides across Taiwan Strait belong to one China. That is the basic fundamental base for U.S.-China relation. And many people say now the China-U.S. relation is getting worse and worse just because the existing administration of the U.S. has begun to damage such a foundation.
The current authority in Taiwan also trying to seek a pro-independence, quote-unquote, direction. It is no secret that Mr. Lee Teng-hui, the one who just passed away, has been advocating that from his days, later by Chen Shui-bian and several others. So how do you see this authority right now in Taiwan is playing with the fire? Do you think they are reasonable enough to know all the nuances about the politics and also about the strong ties between the mainland and Taiwan?
Well, it is very baffling to many of us who are observing Taiwanese politics in recent days, because it is clear that Taiwan has a very high percentage of trade dependence, economic interdependence with mainland China. But at the same time, we also notice that in terms of the external relations, the Tsai Ing-wen administration or the DPP administration is moving closer to the American policy line, whereas the cross-strait relationship has deteriorated to the point of almost no dialogue is possible now. Now, people are wondering, does it make sense at this point to do that? But it is clear, at least from last 2 years' experience, that Tsai Ing-wen is taking the pro-American policy line in order to beef up her electoral support. And while at the same time, she's using the populist sentiment to stir up the kind of hatred toward mainland China, even though it's ill-founded, it is illegitimate, but some of the younger generation voters seem to believe that Tsai Ing-wen is telling them what's good for them. But people are worried because with the arms sales going on, the Americans actually are sending a very false and wrong message to Taiwanese people, because people might be under the false impression that the American administration is willing to defend Taiwan, even if Taiwan declared independence. But if you look at all the experts' opinion, people know that this is false, because America will never defend Taiwan under any situation. As long as Taiwan is taking a provocative stance, we're worried that at this moment, Taiwan is merely seen as a chip on the bargaining table to help Donald Trump's campaign strategy. But that's not making sense, because it's not in Taiwan's best interest.
If we look at how really the mainland and Taiwan are linked, probably that could help people to understand a little bit better. Foxconn, for example, is a symbolic cross-strait investment. Foxconn's Zhengzhou factory has been dubbed as the iPhone city. It employs about 350,000 people and produces 500,000 iPhones a day in the summer, equivalent to half of the world's total. Foxconn intends to open its 13th factory on the mainland in Qingdao, which will focus on 5G and AI testing. And of course, a lot of the Apple products looking at the mainland and beyond around the world are coming from these factories of Foxconn on the mainland. And this is just one of those examples how the economic ties between the mainland and Taiwan has been really going on. Many from outside this area do not know these facts very well. Having said that, though, Professor Yang in Beijing, tell me more about how much do you think the economic and trade ties between the mainland and Taiwan will calm people down and understand the real circumstances at this point when the U.S. politics is going crazy?
Yep. Well, it's an excellent question. Ideally and logically, economic ties, closer economic ties, will play greater role to calm down. You mentioned calm down the sentiment between mainland and Taiwan. Unfortunately, politics in Taiwan and the politics in Washington, D.C. played a negative role that really defeat the role by the economic ties. Now it seems to me China administration has ignored or has thrown away the economic ties, the importance of economic ties, focusing on politics interests. And by the same token, now Trump focused on election politics at the top priority. So basically, such a political negative momentum really intervene and damage the right role by economic ties. So the right way for both sides across the strait is just try best to exclude the political influences and pull the economic ties in normal track so that that can benefit both sides of the people.
Professor Zhang, do you agree?
I would agree. Look at the Kurds in Syria, in the Middle East. American administration never hesitated to turn their back on the Kurds. When the Kurds actually fought so fiercely, so bravely for the American troops on the ground, and how did the Trump administration treat them? He simply betrayed them. Now, this is the same thing that's going to happen if anything goes wrong militarily in the Taiwan Straits area. A lot of people are reminding Tsai Ing-wen, look at the Kurds, look at many other examples around the world. Trump administration will not hesitate to kick you aside, to betray you, and put you on the table as a bargaining chip, as long as the other side can give a better price for Donald Trump. So I have to say that in times like this, when Donald Trump is fighting for his electoral victory or for his own political survival, Taiwan doesn't mean a thing to him. There is no ideal, there is no friendship, only political interest involved in Donald Trump's calculator.
On the other hand, Professor Yang, the very intense situation in the South China Sea. Earlier, China was reporting about the 2,000 flights by the American side over the past months going on in South China Sea. There could be any clash of conflicts over there out of any military accident as we speak. With things there becoming ever more intense, what does that mean for all sides to calm down about the Taiwan issue? And the question really is, will they too?
Well, I don't think there will be military conflicts both by accidental or incidental trigger, simply because both Beijing and Washington are far from preparation for a war against each other. Especially, it's not worth for both of the capitals to engage in such a war, in such a water area. However, for Beijing, Taiwan is indeed a core interest that really concerns China. And also, in my observation, Washington really try every effort to play Taiwan as a card, not ally. I think, ironically, some of Taiwan people believe, oh, they had become again the allies of the United States. No, actually, U.S. regard Trump administration just regard Taiwan as a usable or available geopolitical card for his game. Right. With Beijing. So basically, I don't think South China Sea, no matter how tense situation there, I don't think the risk lies in South China Sea, but in the Strait.
Later, of course, we're going to talk to Professor David Lampton, who's a well-known scholar from the United States on the issue of the South China Sea. But that was for another discussion. Professor Zhang, about the South China Sea and the very intense situation between China and United States in terms of having any chance of military accident. What do you think about how Taiwan should look at the reality once again?
Well, I have to say that DPP or the Tsai Ing-wen administration is now caught in a catch-22 situation. Now, on the one hand, Tsai Ing-wen, is willing to help the Americans out in terms of the South China issue or controversy. But at the same time, Taiwan has a claim over the territorial waters in the South China Sea. Now, here is the contradiction here. On the one hand, the spokesperson for Tsai Ing-wen said that, we welcome Secretary Pompeo's remarks regarding the South China Sea. At the same time, she has to say that, but we still insist on our original claim that at least, like the Spratly Islands, are a part of our traditional territory. Now, here's the catch. Where do you actually stand? What do you do? Some people encourage Tsai Ing-wen to say, you should go down to those little islands and to claim, to show that we actually have the jurisdiction over there. But Tsai Ing-wen hesitated until today. She does not dare to say a word about these territorial disputes because she knows full well either you're looked at by the Taiwanese compatriots as a traitor, or you will be regarded as unfriendly toward the American administration today. So I would say that TPP is making a huge mistake by taking America's sides.
Professor Yang, final words briefly.
Well, I think South China Sea, South China Sea issue played by Washington, D.C. is designed for the domestic election politics. That's not a very long emergent issue for U.S.-China relation. And I firmly believe with time going, this issue will be calmed down, certainly. But U.S. has determined to make both South China Sea issue by Pompeo's statement and the recent increasing activities across Taiwan Strait issues will make U.S.-China relation more and more complicated and risky.
All right. I want to thank both of you for helping us to understand the complexity going on there on the relations across the straits regarding the latest political development in many parts of the world. Thank you so much, Professor Zheng Yuping and also Professor Yang Xiyu. Thank you. Really appreciate it.